It's kind of wild when you think about it. Words we use all the time, like republic, senate, even dictator, they all come from Rome. From their incredible buildings to their laws, the Roman Empire's shadow is just everywhere. At its height, 1 out of every 5 people on the entire planet was a Roman citizen. So how in the world did this one civilization get so powerful for so long? And what exactly caused it all to come crashing down? Okay, let's get into it.
We've all heard that saying, right? And it is so true. Rome's time as a superpower might be long over, but its DNA is baked into our world. Its ideas, its culture, its engineering, it's all still here. So we're going to unpack that whole epic story, from the very first brick to the final crumbling stone.
So to make sense of this massive history, we've broken it down into 4 acts. First, we'll see how the Republic was born. Then we'll dive into its crazy period of expansion and the crises that came with it. After that, we hit the golden age of the empire, and finally, we'll watch its tragic division and fall.
All right, let's kick things off with Act 1, the birth of a republic. So where did this all begin? I mean, how does a small, muddy trading post on a river eventually become the center of the known world?
Well, every great power needs a great origin story, and Rome actually has 2. First, you've got the legend. Twin brothers Romulus and Remus, sons of the god of war, saved and raised by a wolf. It's this incredible myth designed to make Rome sound destined for greatness. But then you have what archaeologists have found. The reality is, well, a little more humble. It was just a small trading post where a few villages decided to team up for safety, and it just grew from there.
So in its earliest days, Rome was a kingdom. But here's the twist. It wasn't your typical monarchy. The crown wasn't just passed down from father to son. Instead, the kings were actually elected by a council called the Senate. It's a really interesting detail that shows Rome was already thinking differently about power. So how did the kingdom end? Well, with a bang. The last king, a guy they called Tarquin the Proud, was a total tyrant. The final straw came when his son did something horrible to a noble woman named Lucretia. That was it. The people of Rome, rich and poor, had had enough. They rose up, kicked out the king for good, and in 509 BC, they created something radical. A republic. A government run by a senate made up of the wealthy patricians and the everyday middle-class folks, the plebeians. Now, this new republic was incredibly ambitious, which leads us straight into Act 2, Conquest and Crisis. All that ambition led to unbelievable growth, sure, but it also created fractures deep inside Roman society. Fractures that would eventually break the whole system. And when I say growth, I mean it just exploded. First, Rome took over all of Italy. Then came the main event, the Punic Wars against their biggest rival, Carthage. This was a brutal, century-long fight for control of the Mediterranean. They even faced off against the legendary general Hannibal and his elephants. But in the end, Rome's victory wasn't just a victory. It was total annihilation. They literally wiped Carthage off the map. This made Rome the undisputed superpower and flooded it with wealth. But all that constant war was changing the republic itself.
See, this new world of endless war created a new kind of celebrity, the rock star general. And there was no bigger star than Julius Caesar. While he was governor of a province, he decided to conquer all of Gaul, basically modern-day France. The campaign was vicious. We're talking 2 million people killed or enslaved. This insane success made him a living legend to the people back home. But to the Senate, he was becoming a terrifying threat.
And this brings up a timeless question, doesn't it? What do you do when a general becomes more famous and powerful than the government he's supposed to serve? The Senate, totally spooked by Caesar's power, ordered him to give up his army and come home. Caesar's response? Nope. Instead, he marched his army across the Rubicon River, which was a direct declaration of war on his own government. There was no going back. And Caesar won. He crushed his main rival, Pompey, and marched into Rome as its undisputed master. He had himself declared dictator for life. Now, he did a lot of popular things, but for a group of senators, this was the end of the line. One man now held all the power, and in their eyes, that meant the republic was dead. So they plotted against him. On the Ides of March, March 15th, 44 BC, they cornered him in the Senate and stabbed him 23 times. The story goes that as he was dying, he saw his close friend Brutus among the attackers and said those immortal words, "Et tu, Brute? You too, Brutus?" The assassins thought they were heroes saving the republic. What they actually did was light the fuse for another, even bloodier civil war. All of that chaos and bloodshed is what brings us to Act 3, the golden age of the empire.
Because out of the fiery ashes of the Republic, something new, something more stable, and maybe even more powerful was about to be born.
When all the dust settled, the man left standing was Caesar's young grandnephew and adopted son, Octavian. He outmaneuvered and defeated everyone, including the famous lovers Mark Antony and Queen Cleopatra. The Senate gave him a new name, Augustus, and with that, he became Rome's very first emperor. His reign kicked off an incredible 41-year period of peace and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. For the first time in a long, long time, the empire was building things instead of just tearing itself apart.
After Augustus, his family, the Julio-Claudians, took over. And let's just say it was a colorful dynasty. You had Tiberius, who was emperor when Jesus was crucified. Then came the notoriously unhinged Caligula, who was so bad his own guards assassinated him. He was followed by Claudius, who was probably poisoned by his own wife, so her son, the infamous Nero, could take the throne. And Nero's reign, well, it ended in tyranny, fire, and suicide. It was a complete soap opera.
Okay, so after all that drama, Rome finally caught a break. A really long one, in fact. It's called the Era of the Five Good Emperors. This was nearly a century of stable, competent rule. Under the Emperor Trajan, the empire grew to its absolute biggest size. His successor, Hadrian, decided to focus on defending those borders, famously building Hadrian's Wall all the way up in Britain. And the last of them was Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, a guy who was literally writing one of history's great philosophical works while on the battlefield. Just amazing. But you know how it goes. Golden ages don't last forever. And that brings us to our final tragic act: division and fall. The stability of those good emperors shattered, giving way to a century of pure chaos, civil war, and a crisis that would tear the empire in two. By the year 285, the empire had become almost ungovernable. It was just too big, too complex, and too unstable for one person to handle. So the Emperor Diocletian tried something radical. He decided to split the empire into two halves, east and west, and he created a four-ruler system to manage it, with a senior and junior emperor for each half. It was a bold plan called the Tetrarchy, a desperate solution for a desperate time.
Well, that four-emperor system didn't last long. It collapsed back into, you guessed it, another civil war. The winner this time was a general named Constantine, and he would change the world forever. He claimed he saw a vision of a cross in the sky before a decisive battle. After he won, he converted to Christianity and became the first Christian emperor. This was a revolutionary move that not only reunited the empire, but put it on a completely new religious course.
But even that unity was temporary. In 395, after another emperor's death, the empire was split for good between his two sons, and the two halves went down very different roads. The wealthy Greek-speaking East became the Byzantine Empire and thrived for another 1,000 years. But the Latin-speaking West, it just started to crumble. Its economy was a wreck, and it faced constant invasions. In 455, the unthinkable happened. The city of Rome itself was brutally sacked. The final nail in the coffin came in 476, when the very last Western Roman emperor, and you can't make this up, his name was Romulus, was kicked off the throne.
And just like that, the Western Roman Empire was gone. It brings us all the way back to the beginning, doesn't it? Empires rise, they have their moment, and then they fall. It's the cycle of history. But the question I want to leave you with is this. The political state of Rome is long dead, of course. But what about its legacy? Our laws, our languages, our architecture, our very ideas about government, is that part of Rome truly immortal? In many ways, that's a story that is still being written today.